Hello, welcome back to Behind the Faders, the live sound channel. Today I want to do a deep dive into mixing kick drums. While we all know that our most important signal in our mix is the lead vocal, at least most of the time, that's not what we enjoy the most, right? What we enjoy the most is delivering that punchy kick and snare. Yeah, so let's talk about kick drums. First of all, a little mindset thing. When you start your sound check, and you usually start with checking the kick drum, don't approach that with the thought that you're now going to dial it in so perfectly that you will never have to come back to it. It never works. You will have to come back to the kick drum channel multiple times for a few reasons. First of all, when you ask a drummer to just play the kick drum, most of the time, especially if he's not a professional drummer, he will kick it a lot harder than he will when he's actually playing the drum kit. Which is why I always ask drummers just to play a groove when I'm sound checking. So at least now I have him play everything the way he will play it afterwards. Reason number two is you will not be able to judge about some elements of your sound until the entire band is playing. So the right amount of attack and the right amount of low end, that all comes together when the entire band plays. So don't spend too much time with it when you're starting, just get it into the ballpark. Okay, first of all, we have to pick a mic. And every sound engineer I ever met has a very strong opinion about his kick drum mic. And there are multiple options. You have the Shure Beta 52. You have the Audix D6, which is very popular in America. Then you have boundary mics, like this one, the Shure Beta 91. These are often used in combination with a dynamic mic, which is something that I sometimes tried, but it never worked for me. You could also use a Sennheiser MD421 or a Sennheiser MD441. You can use an AKG D112. Back in the day, a very popular choice was the Biodynamic M88, or you can also use an Electrovoice RE20. And of course, nowadays there are a lot more manufacturers like Lewitt, and they all have kick drum mics, so you might pick something completely different. For myself, I prefer the Beta 52. I loved it ever since it came out, and in no combination with anything else. Only if I have a band that plays a bit more like vintage style rock or something, then I might use an AKG D112. But usually the Beta 52 does it for me in each case. So the mic obviously has a crucial impact on the sound that you're getting. The other crucial thing is, of course, the tuning and the dumping of the kick drum. Unfortunately, amateur drummers very often don't really know how to tune their kick drum and use the right damping material. And while you can probably do something about the dumping, so if there's too much material in it, take out some of that. But with the tuning, I don't know, I can't tune a kick drum. Most of the time it is what it is. When you come to the mic position, it's usually very obvious. There's a hole in the front skin, and that's where you put the mic. If you have like a jazz folk situation, then there might be a kick drum with no hole in it. And then I just usually put the mic just right in the center, in front of the skin. Talking about that kind of kick drums, that's maybe the first genre we could look at, because in that case, the kick drum is supposed to sound really, really natural, like if you're standing in front of it in a rehearsal room. So that's the easiest case. You could also say it's the most boring case, because you might dial in a low cut, especially if other people ask you to not have too much bottom end in their kick drum. And you might take out some muddy low mids, but that's about it. Very often you can just dial in a low cut and leave the EQ flat. Then if we move on to pop, it's probably the most difficult kind of kick drum, because you want it to be impressive. You want to have a good solid low end. You want to have that nice attack, but it has to be tasteful, not too obvious. So what you do is in the low end, that's usually around like 60 hertz or so. But try to find out where the kick drum has its natural low end. Because if you're cranking it up at the wrong frequency, it doesn't really help. So again, low cut, very low, maybe at 35 hertz. Because even a kick drum that has a lot of low end needs some low cut. And then you can use some modern technology and just bypass the EQ for a second and turn on the RTA on the channel and have a look where this bass drum has its natural punch point. So you boost that. Then you cut some low mids. Where and how much is really, really dependent on the kick drum. Sometimes it's just a gentle cut around 500 hertz. Sometimes you have to dial in a big cut that really comes down to 120. That's really something you have to try out. I would always just prepare a dump with the low mid and then play around with it a little and see where it sounds best. Then we come to the attack. Several options here as well. You can just dial in a high shelf, or you can dial in the beta frequency around 2.5K, and then find another point up in the 6 to 8K range to get this little click. But like I said, if it's a pop thing, don't overdo it. Keep it kind of subtle. Keep it kind of subtle and tasteful. Now, of course, when it comes to like heavy rock and heavy metal, you can go all in. You can be a lot more aggressive, especially with the attack. I mean, just think about Metallica, that massive attack. That's a matter of taste, but it's not a mistake to give it a lot of attack. And of course, a lot of low end without overdriving the system. A special genre is reggae, because reggae has a lot of low end, but it's coming from the bass guitar, it's not from the kick drum. So if you mix reggae, you might low cut the kick drum a little bit higher and not give it too much low end, because the bass is occupying the low lows. Okay, let's talk about dynamics and insert on the kick drum. Many people use noise gates. I stopped using noise gates decades ago, so I can't really tell you too much about modern noise gates. What I always use is an SPL Transit Designer. Actually, when that thing came out, that's when I stopped using noise gates. What it does, it works on the transients. So you can give the kick drum more attack, or less attack if you want to, and you can shorten the decay instead of cutting it off. You can also use a compressor. So if you don't have a transient designer, you can kind of mimic at least the attack side of it with the compressor. So you give it a very long attack time before you compress. So the first transient cuts through before the compressor kicks in. When it comes to enhancing the low end, there's another SPL device called the Vitalizer, which you can use to bring in some low end, which is not even a real physical low end, it is a psychoacoustic low end. This is something you can use if the system is a little bit poor when it comes to the low end. Then there's always the DBX boombox. I think it's DBX 100, which is a subharmonic synthesizer. Another method that some people used is you have a channel with a 50 hertz sine wave on it and a gate. And that gate is triggered by the kick drum. So every time the kick drum hits, the gate opens and you have this 50 hertz sine wave coming through, which mimics a lot of low end. I don't use any of these low end enhancement methods because with today's systems and their capabilities when it comes to the low end, I usually get away with my normal EQ and the transient designer. So after all this, it might sound to you like this is still a pretty long process, even though I told you in the beginning, don't spend too much time with the kick drum when you start your sound check. But, well, if you're just starting out, this might take a while, okay. But if you get more experience, all these things I was talking about are done in a few seconds. And again, you only do it to get the kick drum in the ballpark, and then when the band plays, then you find the right amount of low end and attack for the music. And that's all I wanted to tell you about the kick drum. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section as usual. If you have a lot of questions or a special set of questions, consider booking yourself a coaching call. They start at 15 minutes. And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, please catch up on that because it means a lot to me. It's very helpful and free for you. I see you around. Bye-bye.